All right, everyone. We are almost through the day. We are session 3, building our legislative advocacy skills. So this session is basically an applied learning session. We will kind of go, we will go into the legislative process here in Missouri, and then we will kind of do an applied project of how let's practice giving testimony. What does that look like? So this session is led by a couple of people. First, we have JMO. And I gotta say, JMO has been a beacon of knowledge here in Missouri around public policy and advocacy. So I know a lot of you know JMO, and Zay has been an advocate and an organizer on human rights issues since 1983. JMO is presently the public policy and advocacy manager at Paraquad. Zay has also been the executive director of 2 statewide not-for-profits focused on social and economic justice. And JMO was the state representative of St. Louis City District from 2005 to 2012. So we are grateful to have JMO here. And then we also are, the session is also led by Jessica Trout, who is our co-chair with the Legislative Advocacy Committee. She also works at the Center of Social Action, focused on advocacy and social change, which is based on SLU's campus, right? And prior to her working in higher education, Jessica graduated from St. Louis University as a first-generation college student with a bachelor's degree in social work and international studies. So outside of her work at SLU and her work with the Missouri ID Access Coalition, and I'm sure other coalitions, she has worked with survivors of domestic violence and has a passion for immigration policy. So with that being said, I will yield the floor to these 2 amazing people. There you go.
Okay. A little aside about my introduction. How many of you know somebody else who uses the pronouns ze, zer, zers? Okay, that may be kind of new to some of you. And some of you have known me for decades and you're like, what? Your pronouns are ze, zer, zers? Your name is Jeanette Mott Oxford. Isn't that a girl's name? So let me tell you about that just a little bit. On my photo ID, it says Jeanette Oxford. That is my legal name. It's the one that's on my birth certificate. And yes, I was assigned female at birth, and I'm anatomically a female. However, and about 7 or 8 years ago, I met someone who used the name Henry/Henrietta, and they were gender non-binary. And I said, what is that? I'd not heard of it. And they described that there's a continuum of gender, and that it's not binary, that we're not just male or female or men or women, that there's a continuum and that people identify a lot of different ways. And as they talked, I was like, that's me they're talking about. And so I realized that my actual gender identity is agender. I have never felt like a man or a woman. Even as a child, I did not feel like a man or a woman, but I had no language for that. And I was put in a box and I had to use that. So I started looking for a pronoun to use that fit me. And I chose ze, zer, zers. And the reason I chose it is I thought it would be easier for people because Z rhymes with she, and people were used to calling me she, and zer and zers rhyme with her and hers. So it would be, people might remember it better. And Z and Z, zer, zers also has like all of the vowels that are in he and hers and his. And so it was sort of like, well, it's sort of like all of it combined. But my real state is that I feel like neither. I feel like I'm a human being, not a man or a woman. To me, male and female stuff is kind of like race. Race is a made-up thing that's about oppression. It is not about human beings. It is a made-up thing that is about oppression. So I identify as a human being and agender, and my photo ID says Jeanette Oxford, female. It'll be a long, long time before the state of Missouri lets me put an A for an agender on my photo ID, I would guess. I also don't actually use a hyphen, and that slide is right, that Jeanette Mott Oxford. Mott is my mother's maiden name, and when she died in 1987, I started using it as a middle name. So that's a little bit about me and my photo ID.
Well, thank you.
Not in our script. I just did that to confuse Jessica.
It works. Well, I'm Jessica Trout, as Cherise said, Assistant Director in the Center for Social Action. I also got my master's in social work, emphasizing in social policy. But I learned most of what I know from JMO. So there might be times when I'm corrected. But we're gonna go ahead and jump in. We're gonna start with our 5th grade civics lesson because a lot of us forgot it by 6th grade. I definitely was one of those folks. I know we have a spectrum of folks in here, some people who have testified and are, texting their legislators, and we have other folks who were like me and forgot 5th grade civics. So to start off with, 3 branches of government: legislative, executive, judicial. We are focusing mostly on the legislative branch, so our Senate and House of Representatives. We also have different levels of government, and mostly the state and federal is what confuses people, and then we forget about the local. Please don't.
Right.
Thank you. So our local level in St. Louis, we have board bills, and we just have one legislative branch, our Board of Aldermen. But at the state and federal level, we have what you see up here. But sometimes people will call their federal representatives and say, or they'll call their federal senator and say, hey, I have this bill, HB 1220, and it's talking about funding the highways in St. Louis. And that might be your state level bill. Okay. So then your federal level representatives are going to say, oh, I can't do anything about that. Or vice versa. You get people calling Jefferson City with bills that are federal level. And if you noticed, I also inverted, an HB when it should be SB, things like that, which sometimes they get there when we're lucky or unlucky, but not always. So does that make sense to everybody who needed the review? Okay, great. We're moving on then.
All right, so a lot of people, if we'll go to that, we're supposed to push the button. Thank you very much. So a lot of people are really intimidated by how a bill becomes a law in Missouri, and so they just won't engage because they don't want to make a fool of themselves. Do not do that. If you ignore your power, it will go away. So we all have to engage. And then the other thing I would say is don't stress on this, because never work alone. Don't be a lone ranger. Always work with other people. What do we have to do to build power, Sister Dolores? 3 things.
Build power through organizing people, organizing money, and
well, the ones that what you just said is the first part, which is in order to build power, we have to grow our numbers. We have to organize people. We have to organize money. So we have to grow our numbers. Secondly, the second phase of power is to take action together at key times. So we've got to demonstrate our power by acting together at times that make sense. The third thing we have to do is change the narrative. That is, we need to get the public to talk about the issue the same way we do. And that's by bringing the voices of personally impacted people into the square. Their voices have to be heard, and we need to start talking about it the same way personally impacted people do. So that's how we build power. Sister Dolores is at a group that taught me all about that, using the Gamaliel Network's 3 Faces of Power model. And I've been doing that at Paraquad. We started out with 6 people last February 2023, after Metro Transit denied 19,000 rides to people in February of last year. People with disabilities who couldn't get rides, which does violate the Americans with Disabilities Act. And we've been growing a coalition called the St. Louis Metropolitan Alliance for Reliable Transit, or SMART for short. And we now have 102 Smarties, 102 advocates that we've grown since then. We're rocking it. The FTA has agreed that Metro is in violation of the ADA and has asked them to show a plan for remedy and a timeline by which they'll do it. And the Department of Justice is continuing the investigation. So. And we're continuing to organize. We're trying to get 100 comments into their Board of Commissioners by September 20th. Their next board meeting, see me if you want to join and sending a public comment. So how a bill becomes a law. Get in coalition with people you trust on the issue that you're working on. So for criminal justice ministries, it might be networking with Empower Missouri, where they have a criminal justice task force. For voter protection, certainly the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition. Meet with people, build power through numbers, take action together. Basically, bills are first filed. The first day you can file is December 1st. Bills are read into the journal of the House or the Senate. Then they're assigned to a committee. They may get a hearing. If they're sponsored by a minority caucus member, chances are they are not going to get a hearing. And the next thing it's going to say about that bill is assigned to committee on the last day of session in May and died in committee. So that's kind of the life cycle of bills sponsored by people in the minority. But if you have a majority sponsor or some leverage somehow from a minority sponsor, minority caucus sponsor, you may get a hearing on a bill. In that hearing, witnesses come and talk. You can also testify. It's a public hearing. They have to announce it at least 24 hours in advance. In the House, you can submit testimony online through a portal. Even if you can't be there, you can do that till midnight of the day of the hearing. In the Senate, they don't want to make it very easy. They used to only count it as official testimony if you could be there in person. It's 132 miles from my house to the state capitol. People with disabilities don't have transportation from here to Jeff City. So some of us are shut out of the process. We've now got the Senate trained that if you have a disability, you can basically call and say, I need an accommodation because I have a disability and I have no transportation to the state capitol, and they'll take your written testimony, but you have to go through that. We're trying to make that better. We have a disability policy coalition working on that issue. About generally a week later after the hearing, there will be an executive session on your bill, or could be some weeks after that, depending on what all's going on and how the hearing went and how the chair feels about your bill. But there'll be an executive session in which the bill may get passed out. And then your next hope is that you would get floor debate on it. It would go on the House or Senate calendar, get floor debate. If it passes that chamber, it goes over to the other chamber and it starts again. And then if it's passed by both chambers, if it's in the same form, it goes to the governor's desk. If it's not in the same form, it goes to a conference committee. They hash out the differences. In an ideal world, what really happens generally is the majority caucus writes the what's called the committee conference report and gives it to the minority folks and say, here, sign this. And then you can tell by whether they signed it, how they felt about it. I used to refuse to sign them if they didn't involve me in the conference, because that's not right, is it? You're supposed to get to actually have a voice for the people you represent. You're just as important as the people in the majority caucus. So a lot of sneaky things happen. Another weird thing on here is these rules committees. They didn't have those in the 1990s when I first started following Missouri politics. Those got added during my time in office between 2005 and 2012. What are they about? They're a moneymaker. That's why you have rules committees. By having an extra hoop that things have to jump through, the majority party, whoever it is, has an extra way to get donations into their committee folks in order to pour money into campaign committees that will then influence politics. So that's what I think rules committees are about. The governor can sign or not sign a bill, and if the governor does not veto it, it becomes law. We'll go over some of that later. So that's the basic flow of the legislative process, but don't do it alone. Get in coalition with others, because you need numbers if you're going to build power and win.
My slides over here. All right, things to think about. I put a little GIF up there because this isn't just, oh, I hope it's going to work. We actually have to think about it if we want to truly pass bills and get things done. And JMO alluded to some of these, but where is the bill in the process? So if it is in committee, unless your state representative or senator is in that committee, they're not really going to care about the bill yet. And so you want to be talking to folks who are in the committee. So knowing where the bill is helps you know like who you're going to target and who you need to talk to. What party is in power? If you're in Missouri, if your bill is filed by a Democrat, it's like pretty certain it's going to die. Not 100% because some of them have like some good relationships and can get their friends on the other side of the aisle to help them out. But generally in Missouri, you're going to want a Republican to file and champion your bills. What are the relationships between the sponsor and the power players? So you can have a Republican that has your bill, but if they piss somebody off already that's in power, their bill also may not move.
That's right.
So it sounds kind of complicated to be like, wait, well, how do I know all this? Yeah, I'm still asking myself that. Usually I just go to JMO. But I think that goes back to what JMO said about being in coalition, working in teams. Different people know different people. And you may also know lobbyists or something and say, oh, I can text and see what their relationship is like. It also sometimes just takes some time. And if policy is not where you are, if you're not going to get deep in this, you can still help us. And we're going to show you that later. And that's pretty much just saying, what do you need? And people like us will say, this is what I need. Okay. Yeah, I already kind of talked about that one. And then who can influence folks in House and Senate? This may not be other like other folks who are in the House and Senate. It might be DOC. It might be the DMV. Okay. Who do we know that can have some influence? Or in Jefferson City, police officers. Okay. Who has influence? Do we have those relationships? What does it mean to use those relationships?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really important. I really recommend kind of creating a spreadsheet for yourself where you keep little tidbits about people. You know, like for example, I'm filing away who has kids with disabilities, right? Because Paraquat is going to need to influence those people in the future. So Leslie Darrington, who's running for state representative, has a child with a profound disability. U.S. Senator Eric Schmidt has a child with a profound disability. You want to know those kind of things because it gives you a chance to think about who to send into a small meeting with them and influence them. So start to make your notes, even if it's not about you. You know, you may be able to figure out somebody that, oh, they have a background in doing physical therapy. Let me think about, I get physical therapy. Is my physical therapist part of an association that would talk to them? You know, make a note of these things that they can really be helpful to you later. So what can happen to a bill? I mentioned that after the hearing, there's a period of time where the bill can be worked on. And often a variety of people that testified at the hearing will go to see the committee chair and say, I could support that bill if you take this sentence out and put this sentence in instead, or if you change this comma to a semicolon. I mean, those kind of things actually matter and how the bill will be applied at times. And so you have some time to work on the bill. You can use this for your defensive strategy or for your strategy to get something passed is, you know, how do I change the language in a way that will stop some of the opponents from opposing it? Or how can I change the language in a way that will attract more votes to it? So work on the bill while it's in committee. You know, find folks on the committee that can help you succeed at that. The power structure within the committee is there's the chair and the vice chair. They have a lot of power. So get to know those folks. And then the other person is called the ranking member. The ranking member is from the minority caucus. I think usually the website will say whether they're ranking members, but if it doesn't, go to the minority floor leader and ask them who's the ranking member on this committee so that you can build a relationship with them too. And they have a lot of power to help you change language in a bill. In the committee, bills may be combined. Let's say that they, for example, there was a bill that did a lot of good things for social services in 2023. There were two of them, Senate Bill 45 and Senate Bill 90. And they did some things around infant and child health, and then I think maybe child care. You probably remember better than me, Gina. I don't know. But Representative Melanie Stinnett, a freshman from Springfield, who actually does work in, I think, occupational therapy or speech therapy, had this great bill to improve earnings and asset rules for people with disabilities so that you didn't get punished for working or marrying, which is what a concept. We say we support marriage and we support work, but people with disabilities actually were experiencing punishment for earnings or for marrying, because if your spouse had a little bit of income, since you could only have Medicaid up to 85% of the federal poverty level, right? If you have a disability, the earnings rules are actually better for other people than for people with disabilities in Missouri right now to get Medicaid. That doesn't make sense, does it? So she had a bill, two bills to improve things for people with disabilities. She got that language added into Senate Bill 106, which also landed on the governor's desk and was signed. But it was in Senate Bill 45 and in Senate Bill 90, and those bills got combined into one bill called Senate Bills, the House Committee substitute for Senate Bills 45 and Senate Bill 90. So you get these long titles. That can happen in committees too. If you don't get the bill like you want it in the committee, when there's floor debate, you can try to have somebody offer an amendment then to improve things. The other thing is, let's say our bill has been heard in committee to do something about IDs that we want done, but we're not getting floor debate on it. When another bill is being debated that opens the same section of RISMO, our SMO, the regulations of the state of Missouri, you can offer an amendment, and if the speaker is amenable to you, they will recognize you and let you offer it from the floor so that there can be some debate on it and get that into a bill that way. Now, the thing that happens sometimes is I used to weigh 431 pounds and dress in really like bright purple jackets and stand on the floor of the House and wave a piece of paper over my head, and the speaker couldn't see me. It was an amazing thing. I could not offer my amendment. I was like, how big do I have to get before you'll know I'm here, bud? You know, so it's very frustrating. But if you work with the right carrier for your amendment, you can have some floor debate and get something on from the floor. But don't try it on a bill that hasn't been heard in committee, because they'll say, has this bill been vetted? And pretty much your bill is going to die. I mean, your amendment is going to die. So have a hearing on your bill. Every year, make your bill go farther down the way than it did before. And that's how you get somewhere. You grind it out like going 5 yards at a time on a football field, right? Every year you advance your legislative ball a little farther than last year. Now, a danger is your bill passes, but there's no money put in the budget for it, because the budget bills are like budget bills 1, 2, 3 on up to like 18, 19, whatever it is. And those bills correspond to a department of government. And if there's not money in the budget for the thing that you just got passed, it can't be implemented because it's going to take money probably. An example of this from Sister Dolores's world is Metropolitan Congregations United worked very hard several years ago to get a bill passed called Persistence to Graduation, to focus on helping people graduate high school. And no money was appropriated for it, so nothing happened with it. And about 3 years later, they passed every year they pass, or every 2 years or so, they pass a massive bill that's called Cleaning Up Obsolete Language and Obsolete Statutes. So anything that has been on the books for a while and never got any money, they just take it away. And so MCU lost their Persistence to Graduation language because it never got any money. So you have to watch for that. Try to get your money in there. When MCU won the Get the Lead Out of School Water Act in 2022, we got $27 million put in so that every public school district in the state of Missouri could test their water and make sure kids weren't drinking lead. So get your money in your bill. All right.
And just back to coalitions and working with folks, if you are really confused about how that works, look up Missouri Budget Project. They are amazing and can help you through that. If your coalition doesn't know or may need some help, they do a lot of trainings on how the budget works and know people. Yeah, Gina.
Wanted to say how I think coalition.
Yeah, Empower Missouri has a food security coalition, a criminal justice task force, I think called community justice now, and then a affordable housing and homelessness task force as well. So if you want to work on those, they're a great place to work. They also do training for advocates so that you don't have to do it. It's a lovely thing that I was part of the strategic plan years ago to get going, and it's now becoming real, and I'm so excited to see that. But we so much needed Missouri Budget Project to inform us on everything about budget when I was at Empower Missouri. And I made sure we paid our dues to Missouri Budget Project or gave them an annual gift because you know what? Don't be a freeloader. Don't use people's stuff and not give them money. Give them money, y'all. All right?
Cookies don't count for that. I mean, they help, but slide it along with the check. All right, so bringing it a little bit more to Missouri, just a few things to note. Our governor has what's called pocket approval, which means he doesn't actually have to sign it. He just has to not veto it. We have the initiative petition, which a lot of you know has been under attack in the last legislative session. But that is where citizens are able to put something on the ballot to have it voted on. For example, abortion, hopefully stays there. And so that's an expensive process though. It takes notaries, it takes paid people, it takes getting around your entire state and being out there. It's not something just people in this room would probably be doing. And then this is a hill I'm going to die on and probably piss some people off, but our taxes are too low. So if anything has a fiscal note, it's very hard to get it funded because we don't have a ton of general revenue because our taxes are very low. And the more we get our taxes cut, the less money there is in the state of Missouri to fund the things we need funded. This is again my own hill. You can disagree with me. Well, certain pieces of it are fact, but what should be is my opinion.
Yeah. I agree with you entirely that we're producing too little general revenue. However, the way we're producing it is stacked in an unfair way. We haven't changed our tax table since 1931 in Missouri. So our top tax bracket starts at about $9,000 a year. And when I was a legislator, I proposed something called the Tax Justice for a Healthy Missouri bill. It actually lowered taxes for the bottom 60% of people, raised $1 billion in new income in order to fund schools, public health clinics, stuff that needed to be done. And there was only one group of people that had asked to pay any more than now, and that was people that made more than $1 million a year. And nobody paid more than 2% more than they do now. And right now, the richest 20% in Missouri actually pay less as a proportion of their income than the people at the bottom. The poorest 20% pay the highest percentage of their incomes as taxes. So we have a very unfair and adequate tax system that does need to be changed. What did I get for sponsoring my bill? Out of the 8 years, I got 3 hearings, and the Missouri Chamber of Commerce and Industry called me that woman that wants to destroy our state. So, okay.
Z was in the minority party, if you haven't picked that up.
All right, so effective testimony. I think the voices of personally impacted people have so much power, and it's really important to bring their voices into the discussion. For example, the awful Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act of 1996 that ended the entitlement to cash aid if you're very, very poor, the Aid for Families with Dependent Children law, and replaced it with TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. Don't you think you're just going to get on this program and stay forever? We know that you love sucking up that $292 a month for a family of 3 that Missouri has provided to families on cash aid in Missouri since 1991. It hasn't gone up $1 since 1991. It went up by $3 in 1991 from where it was in 1975. Don't you think you're going to go get on forever? We're going to start a clock running on you because that's why you're poor. You need a clock running on you that you have to hurry and stop being poor because you're lazy. That's your problem. So,
We're having a lot of TED Talks up here.
The personally impacted people telling their stories really matters. So part of that bill was that you couldn't get food stamps if you'd had a drug felony. So Empower Missouri was able to get some people that were personally in that situation to go tell their stories. And there was a gentleman named Johnny Waller Jr. who had to quit his job when his son was dying of cancer at age 5 and couldn't get SNAP for their household because he'd had a drug felony when he was a teenager. And he went and told his story, and our governor, Michael Parson, was the chair of the committee that heard that bill, and I saw Mike swallow tears. I saw his Adam's apple bob in his neck, and I thought, we're going to win this bill. And we did. That's what works, is you want to say, let's convince them with dollars. They'll go to the dollar argument later, but it's about hearts. Can you touch somebody's heart with a story? Our keynote speaker, talked about how there's ignorance. Yes, there is, but we can't win things just with facts. We have to change things with relationships. Help people fall in love with a personally impacted person. That's how we win these things. And it's hard because many legislators refuse to meet any personally impacted people. We would issue the invitations all the time and just be turned down. So let's be beastly clever in how we help legislators meet personally impacted people and enable them to fall in love with them, because the way you break down prejudice is through repeated positive interactions with the object of your prejudice. Repeated positive interactions with the object of your prejudice. Let's make that happen. That's how things happen. Okay, so get personally impacted people to tell their stories. Whether it's folks at an agency that are having trouble or folks that don't have the photo ID that are having trouble, help them tell their stories in a committee hearing, in a small group meeting, et cetera. Do think about the biases that are out there. If you have someone come in who's not clean and sober for the meeting, it may influence how the legislator feels. So you may know this is a person of value. I love that harm reduction thing. Where are you, harm reduction person? Are you still in the room? You do. I love your program, the brick and the tea stuff. Yes, serve everybody, and the Housing First method does work. Get people into a house before they're clean and sober, and they have a better chance of getting clean and sober. But you have to think about what biases are there on the part of legislators and whether that's the best messenger or not. Don't read your testimony. You can give it to them in writing, but summarize it aloud. It's very impactful to be there in person if you can, and stay in touch with the chair, and that way you know the timing of everything.
Along with staying in touch with the chair, if you have a relationship with a member on another bill or another topic, and they may disagree with you on the topic you were speaking on that day, it's good to at least give them a heads up. Hey, I'm going to be in your committee today. I'm going to be talking about this. Or if you've even talked to them already, it's just a courtesy thing. It helps those relationships. If you don't do it, you're not going to necessarily get, kicked out of their office next time or anything. It's just a good practice. For folks who like kind of the prescription of how do I do testimony, we put it up here, but I do want to re-emphasize what JMO said, that it's about relationships, it's about people impacted, and it's about the audience you're speaking to. Although you will get cut off usually, I've been cut off very quickly. But that's the more important piece. And I think I want to say that for meetings as well. But some of the rules that aren't hard rules, but are good to know. Address your chairperson. Thank them for giving you the time to speak, and for listening to this bill if you support it. Give your name, where you're from, And if you're working with an organization or testifying on behalf of the organization, say that. Do get their approval, probably. You know, or just say sorry later. Make sure you are clear whether or not you support or oppose the bill. Okay. Then go into some of your reasons with data if you feel like that is kind of what's going to be needed from you that day, or a story. So I think those can be both. They can also be or, depending on who you are and where you're coming from. Restate your position if you had time in the 2 minutes and weren't already cut off, and then thank them. They will probably, well, there's a potential that you will get questions. Okay. This is true in meetings as well. Never lie. Don't make it up on the spot. I think that seems like general, like duh. But I think when we are on the spot and we want something to be passed or be done, and we are seen as an expert, we want to continue to be seen as an expert. If you don't know, just say, I will get that answer for you. Okay. That is perfectly fine. And then, yeah, I forgot this part was up here. But also make it into a letter to the editor if you can. Get that out there more.
And maybe one of the personally impacted people that spoke can also do a guest column. Sometimes those are called op-eds, but that's more like an op-ed if the newspaper staff writes it. It's a guest column if your folks write them, but help them get their story into the paper. It can really matter. What to expect next year. In case you don't know, there's something called an election happening on November the 5th, and you have to register to vote by October 9th. So if you aren't registered to vote, see me and I'll help you make that happen. Conventional wisdom says that our next governor will be, oh, somebody can help you right now. There we go. All right. Your every wish is my command. Go to register or change your address or whatever you need to do right over there with my friend Denise. Conventional wisdom says that our next governor will be the Republican candidate Mike Kehoe, and that Cindy O'Laughlin, who was the majority floor leader in the Senate last year, is apt to move up to the president pro tem of the Senate. And the speaker pro tem from last year on the House side, John Patterson, a lovely physician from the Independence, Missouri area, is apt to become the Speaker of the House. However, nothing is written in stone because the elections are November the 5th. And one of the things that I would like to encourage you to do is not to cede anything. If you believe somebody is a really good candidate, work your tail off for them. One of the people running for Secretary of State who will oversee our future elections is someone who pushes the big lie that the election in 2020 was stolen. I don't want to see someone who pushes the big lie become our Secretary of State. And so I'm working very hard to try to help a different candidate that I trust more win that race. This is a nonpartisan gathering. I'll leave names and party labels out of this, but it's important to me to try to turn around what the polling says is going to happen by making sure enough people understand that when it comes to the Secretary of State, you want somebody that's honest and who will oversee election integrity in a way that is not about partisanship, but is about what data tells us actually works to make sure that we can trust our votes. So don't just give up on candidates that you believe should win. When I'm out of this room, I'll see any of you that want to talk to me about some key races where investment matters. All right. Pre-filing of bills, I got my vowels switched around there, begins on December 1st annually. The first day of the legislative session is always the first Wednesday after the first Monday in January. So that's January 8th this year. There'll be a lot of changes because of term limits. 8 senators couldn't run again because of term limits. 34 House members couldn't run again because of term limits. Some people chose to run for a different office because they wanted to become something statewide or whatever. And so there'll be a lot of education that has to happen. I did not vote for term limits when that was on the ballot. We already had term limits. They are called elections. if you pay attention, you can vote people out of office that aren't doing a good job instead of just treating everybody like a carton of milk that expires and throwing them out periodically. I think that's a little bit of a healthier thing. The governor's State of the State address is likely to be the 3rd or 4th week of January. With a new governor, that gives you a chance to see what their agenda is going to be for their 4-year term. When you get to the advocacy 401 level instead of 101, you get to influence what's in the governor's speech. So keep turning along and working with other people, and you may have a sit down with some of the governor's staff that winds up getting something put into the governor's speech. So that's a cool thing. And then committees take a little while to form after the gubernatorial elections. We may not know about that for a little while. The relationship between the governor's office and the House and Senate leaders determines a lot. And the Freedom Caucus that became sort of a third party in the two most recent legislative years did well in the August 6th primary. So they're on the ballot, and we'll see how that coalesces. Bill Eigel will not be in the Senate anymore. He often was the one filibustering. But there are other people, Rick Bratton, Mike Moon, who are likely to be back that may continue to filibuster the reading of the Senate Journal so that nothing happens. So we will see. Much remains to be revealed, but you can change the outcomes of November 5th by where you spend your time, what doors you knock on, what phone calls you make, what postcards you write, what checks you write, putting a yard sign out, et cetera. There are things to do between now and November 5th.
They asked us to do legislative 101, and if you haven't noticed, we can't do that without having opinions. So I'm just going to throw another one out there. Speaking of Bill Eigel, I made a meme that said Billy the Bully. That's really how I feel. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Oh, I didn't move this. So you all have been here all day, so you know a lot of what is on this teeny tiny little sheet that you can't see. So I'm going to have you shout it out. I will repeat. What does the Missouri ID Access Coalition do?
Help people get photo ID, government issued photo ID.
Help people get government issued photo IDs.
Advocacy to make it easier for everyone.
Advocate to make it easier for others to get photo IDs or vital documents.
Build relationships statewide.
Build relationships statewide.
I'm here all day. To get the underlying documents like a birth certificate or social security card.
Okay, helping get social security card, underlying documents. Would also say some education pieces. Shaping legislative policy. Okay, awesome. Why do people need IDs? What are the issues?
Voting.
Voting,
Employment.
employment, housing,
Medical.
medical,
Banking.
banking,
Access to government buildings.
access to government buildings,
Nation state. Booze.
booze?
Why not? Booze, yeah.
Oh, like alcohol. I thought you meant like boo.
Airplanes.
Airplanes, travel,
Cigarette.
cigarettes.
Import stuff.
Okay. Awesome. And why don't people have IDs? What are the barriers? Cost. Lost it. They don't have transportation.
Natural disasters.
Natural disasters.
Fire.
Fire.
No address.
They moved.
Incarceration.
They were incarcerated, and it either they lost it at that point or it expired.
Using document requirements.
Confusing requirements.
They were foster care who aged out. and
Yep,
without
yep.
Aged out of foster care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Circular requirements.
Yeah.
They were born at a time or place that they never received vital documents.
I heard domestic violence victims.
Yep, sometimes. Yeah.
Without documentation.
Yeah, survivors of domestic violence, their abuser may have held the documents. Okay, So we know the information that we need for this next part. Okay, so I'm gonna go through a couple more bills before we do this part. But what you see on the screen, there's about 20 agencies here listed that will likely be updated soon. And so, and it's a handout essentially of what the coalition does. I mentioned earlier, if you were in the coalition meeting, that we are working on relationship building. So we're going to practice some of that in a little bit. Before we do that, I'm going to tell you a couple of bills that we saw last session. That might be something that while you're talking to the legislator today, you want to bring up if they ask, well, like, how does this even impact the legislative work? Okay. But you also may not bring it up depending on who you're talking to. Okay. So last session, as JMO talked about the bills that were combined into House committee substitutes, we had a bill that required the DOC to provide vital documents. This bill was combined with a lot of other bills. So things like we can't shackle women who are giving birth, the SNAP ban on former drug felons because it passed, but like yeah.
Didn't pass in the form that could be implemented, yeah.
That. It didn't pass in the form that could be implemented, but there was also a truth in sentencing clause that was put in there that pretty much said you have to serve the minimum number of years in your sentence. Okay, which in the past you could get good time credit, things like that, and get out sooner. So we were watching this bill. We supported the DOC piece, even though it didn't really have any teeth, meaning there was no consequence if the DOC didn't actually do it, but at least we can say, hey, you're supposed to, it's written in law. Okay. So we sent some letters, things like that, and we're at the point where we were ready to talk to legislators about this bill. And then it died. But, and you can also see here, this is interesting. We were able to talk about recidivism rates and how IDs would improve recidivism rates, and that Missouri has a higher incarceration rate than the average of the United States, and way more than other countries. Okay. So we had this handout ready for them, and you're welcome to, like, in your meeting, talk about things with the DOC. But what we have very clearly is we only support this bill if the truth in sentencing provision is removed. Otherwise, we don't support the bill. Okay. As a committee, that was a decision, and we're working on some structure as far as making sure that is speaking for the coalition. But that is to come as we formalize more. The other bill we were watching had to do with immigration and voting. It required a citizenship marker on IDs. Boo or booze? Both. I'm here all night too. So this one, if you are a U.S. citizen, you would have a little flag on your ID. I know, right? Don't we all want to carry a little flag? Yes. Yeah, we couldn't pick which flag. Okay, so we were watching this. It had gotten committee hearings. It had some movement. The problem with this is a lot. One problem is that it was framed as a voting bill. Okay, but as most of you know, and if not, remember on your amendments during elections, that you already have to be a citizen to vote. It is a federal crime, and you will not get citizenship if you break that rule if you are an immigrant. There are huge consequences to immigrants for breaking that. So they were trying to say, oh, immigrants are going to try to vote in our elections. Okay. We have a data piece here. that instances of non-citizens registering to vote are more rare than death by lightning. We want it to be fun. And then we were also explaining, this is a slippery slope. Are they going to start putting religious markers on your IDs soon? Are they going to start adding, what else did we have on there? Education. What is your highest education level? Things like that. What's the limit of what can be on the ID? I personally do not believe in good and bad immigrants, but this also didn't specify if somebody was a refugee here on a visa, anything like that. And it will increase overall. Like if somebody who is a refugee who has a driver's license gets stopped, who's to say that officer is not going to discriminate against them further or assume that they are undocumented because they don't have this marker? Okay. I just went on a tangent. I'm also on the Missouri ID or the Missouri Immigration Policy Coalition. So I got a little extra passionate on this one. Apologies. So that's kind of what happened last session. As JMO mentioned, we don't know what's going to happen exactly this session. There's a chance we will see some of these bills again. And therefore, now we have language for that. There's also a chance we are going to see different bills or that we are going to be working on municipal IDs or homebound IDs, things like that. But what we're going to do now in your groups is take this knowledge, take this understanding of what work the coalition does, and maybe, if needed, what bills we have seen. And it's going to be November 15th today. Okay, so put your head there. We're going to get into groups of 3. And you are going to take turns talking like you're talking to a Democrat who doesn't know anything about this, because there's a good chance, and a Republican who you don't know what they think. Okay. Things to kind of operate on. Introduce yourself and why you're there. Ask them what their priorities are. What are they interested in? What do they care about? The point of this meeting today is relationship building, getting to know people and letting them know the coalition's out there. It can be a little bit more casual, literally just a conversation to get to know each other. You would provide the handout of the mission and like email them information if you're doing like a Zoom meeting. But just explain the work, explain why this matters, why it's an issue, things like that. And you're going to tailor your message depending on who you're talking to. And if they have any questions, ask them if they have any questions, ideas, or someone else they think you should talk to. Okay. Again, going back to what I said earlier, it's less about being structured and doing it perfectly and more about doing it and being authentic and building a relationship. Okay. And then we will switch who you're talking to. So Christine, can you come up here? This is just because I'm a visual person. Okay. So in your groups of 3, right now, me and Christine are going to talk to JMO. JMO is a Democrat in this scenario. Okay. I'm not actually going to act it out. I'm just going to move. Okay. Now, me and JMO are the constituents, and Christine is a Republican. Okay. So that's what you're going to do when you switch. So one person's going to be in the meeting twice, and then 2 other people will play the role of the legislator. Okay. The reason for this, thank you. You were very helpful. The reason for this is just practicing talking to legislators about these issues, putting it in our own words, and realizing, well, you'll realize when you start doing it, legislators are just people.
Right.
Sometimes they're really cool people. Sometimes they're, the family member you didn't want to go to dinner with. but they're people, okay? Any questions? Okay. We have, so we're gonna do kind of 5 minutes and 5 minutes. And in your book, actually, I had it labeled, if you need some talking points, you need some help. It is in your book. Some of these different pieces, page 13 to 15, can be helpful if you need to look down. Okay. And go.
Groups of 3.
Yeah, get into groups of 3, please. All right, we have about 5 minutes. I would love to report out, but I also want to see if there's any questions before we do the report out, whether about this or overall. Any overall questions or about meetings? Yes.
So this handout, is this process basically the same for Board of Aldermen or County Council or however, the more local legislatures?
The question
Oh.
was,
This-
is this the same process for everybody? Not
For-
quite. So you're going to need to learn the rules for the body that you're working with, and they're, you know, a lot of it is kind of the same. There's almost always a public hearing. There's almost always like perfection of a bill in which amendments can be offered and a final vote, but it will differ just a little bit and what things are called. It's mainly its vocabulary. Like St. Louis County Council has the thing called the Committee of the Whole, you know, that they say we're going to have a cow meeting. They mean the Committee of the Whole. So, yeah. So, there are some things in common, but you have to learn the rules in each of the things that you work on. Yeah.
Somebody who has done this kind of work to speak to legislators told me that what they did is they researched first what the legislature, like 2 or 3 positive things that they had done in the past session for the group, and brought that up initially to break the ice and also to come off as you've done a great job in this area. Do you recommend that before you go into your spiel related to your own?
I think if you can compliment them on something that you appreciate them for, that's a good thing. Years ago, I saw a poster in a place that I worked that said, doing a good job around here is kind of like peeing in your pants in a dark suit. It gives you a warm feeling, but mostly nobody notices. And so that's how it feels to be a legislator. You work really hard and nobody notices. So if they did sponsor a bill that would expand childcare or you know, help foster kids or something that you care about, saying that I think is a really good bridge builder. I also look at what's in their office. You know, if there was a picture of them celebrating that they got a hole in one at golf and you're a golfer, you might say, oh, wow, I've never had a hole in one. I mean, anything that helps, you know, establish that relationship thing with them. Yeah.
We probably only have room or time for one more, just based on the schedule.
It's maybe a little off base, but we were talking about how important or useful it is to have or know someone in administrative office. That can be very helpful because they too work with legislatures. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. And yeah, that would be, I agree with that. I think that's why we have both our government relations committee and our legislative committee. I think one thing we didn't hit today was that, like, as a legislative committee with the coalition, we have to be careful that we don't push something that the government relations committee is working on, or that folks in Fresh Start are working on, that will actually make folks dig their heels in and do the opposite. So that comes back to the strategy too, when sometimes it might seem like we're not doing something that could be done. It might be because the government relations side makes more sense and more will get done there than if we tried to bring it up legislatively.
But yes, an example of what Gina was talking about is we had meetings with Director Precythe, who was the cabinet member for the Department of Corrections, and her legislative liaison, Adam Albach, to make as much progress as we did toward getting things improved in the for prison release. It's not where it needs to be yet, but we made some progress there without a bill. So yeah, administrative talks matter a lot.
I think that's all we have for you.
All right.